Um, I am delighted to be here at the Vinci Institute, and I thank Professor Anderson for making this forum available. I also would like to thank the Mani Magau, I don't think she's here yet, who introduced me to Professor Anderson and frankly was the one who helped me identify some of the talent you will be hearing from today. We started the Legacies Forum within the National I'm now naming an organization I used to be president of, within the Global Summit of Women, because over the 20-year history of the summit, we have gathered significant women leaders from every arena of business and public life, and we thought we should share these talents with different audiences in different parts of the world. So we now have had Legacies Fora in Austria, we had them in Germany, in Mexico, and the US as well. And what we hope to get from these forums is a way of gathering insight and through the experiences of the women whom we will introduce to you today and whom we have introduced in other fora. We also want to gain a sense of what being successful means and what it takes to get there. I always say, why should women have to start from zero? Why don't we learn from each other? And so I hope that today we will have those lessons come through as well. This is the first Legacies Forum that we're holding in South Africa. And shortly you will meet women of achievement, some from entrepreneurship and some from the corporate sector. And just so you understand, to what extent they have been very successful, let me just give you a context. Hi, Namani. I just mentioned you earlier. That's Dr. Magau. Let me give you a context against which to measure the achievements of the women whom I will be introducing to you shortly. And I will use the context of my country, the United States, just so you get a sense of how much farther we have to go. In the US, there are only 13 women CEOs in the 500 largest companies as ranked by Fortune magazine. 13. In a country that prides itself in equal representation. Within the Fortune 500, only 16% of senior executive positions are held by women. Instead, where the women are trapped is in mid-level positions as directors and managers. In terms of boards of directors, only 15.2% of board seats are held by women in the United States. Here in South Africa, it's 14.6%, and among CEOs, only 2% are female. So clearly, we have a long road yet to go before we reach equity. But there's a bit of good news. Where women have made significant headway in the economic sphere is as entrepreneurs. In my country, 40.4% of entrepreneurs are women, and they generate $2 trillion worth of revenues yearly, and they hire 13 million people combined. There was a statistic given a few years ago that said that women-owned small businesses in the US hired more employees than the Fortune 500 combined. In other countries of the world, in Europe, 1 out of 3 small businesses is now owned by a woman. In China, it is 1 out of 20. In Japan, it's 1 out of 25. So it's a growing phenomenon. In the area of micro-entrepreneurship, which is where you tend to find most women in many parts of the world, 80% of micro-entrepreneurs are women. So the reason why this is important is because the foundation of every economy in the world is small business. And women are the growth sector in that arena. In the US, the majority of new small businesses are now being formed by women. So if they are hitting the glass ceiling in board directorships or in senior corporate management, the women are creating their own economic sphere as entrepreneurs. In Rwanda, the country that was hit by genocide, that had 800,000 people who died, unfortunately mostly men and boys, the women had to take over in order to survive. Not only have they taken over, they have thrived. Right now, 40% of business owners in Rwanda are women, and they have the only female-dominated parliament in the world. 55% of parliamentarians are women, which sort of drove a friend of mine to ask, Irene, do men have to die before women can lead? So I said, hopefully not, but we want to share, power, to be there 50-50. In Colombia, a lot of women are in government and in business because of the drug wars that have also taken away a lot of the men. So the head of Procter & Gamble, Colombia, is a woman. The head of IBM, Colombia, is a woman. The head of Ernst & Young, Colombia, is a woman. I went through a list like this when I was organizing the summit in Chile. And I said, what's with Colombia? And that's when when it was explained to me why women had to take on leadership roles as a consequence of the men dying off because of the drug wars. Anyway, so with that background in mind, let me move forward to introducing to you our panelists. So I'm going to move over here, and I'm going to introduce them one at a time so that you get to know their backgrounds. Okay? Thank you. I'm going to begin. We're going to do this alphabetically, the way we do it in academia. And we're going to begin with Shirley Arnold. Shirley, if I can please have you come over. While she's, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Let me just turn this on. Okay, better. Right here, Shirley. Shirley Arnold is the chair of the board of Telkom. All of you are familiar with Telkom South Africa. She was also on the board of Piermont Global Limited and Ernst & Young South Africa, where she also served as chairman from February 2005 to 2006. She's a member of several business leadership fora, like the Chairperson's Forum. You're familiar with GIBS, the Independent Directors Initiative, the Institute of Directors of South Africa. Prior to all of this, she was a consultant, and her clients have included Unisys, Rockefeller Foundation, the Investor Responsibility Research Center, and so on. So welcome, Shirley. Shirley, you weren't born chair of the board of Telkom, right? So tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where did you go to school?
Actually, I was born in Durban. I actually spent most of my life outside of South Africa because I grew up in Swaziland where I went to university and came back to South Africa in '77. It was the period when most organizations were banned. It was the period of black consciousness. I started working in Pretoria, and 2 days after I got there, my boss was banned, so he gave me a map of Johannesburg. I was a girl from rural Swaziland, and he said, you now have to do everything I have to do, because banning meant that he couldn't be with more than one person at any time, and that he was confined from 6 to 6, either at the office or at his home, and usually these were 5-year bannings. It was a huge political conscientization for me, because it was the time when I got to Pretoria, Solomon Mashanga was executed, and that was also how I met my husband, who was working with lawyers for human rights, and the next thing we had was the tragic death of Steve Biko. So we were I fell into this political and anti-apartheid conundrum. I must say I wasn't very politicized at that point, but falling right deep into it, it had a huge huge impact on my sense of justice, my sense of fairness, and I think it's something that is carried with me to today. I then spent 10 years in the States. I came back to Southern Africa in 92, lived in Botswana, and in 94 I came back to South Africa, and I've been here since. I've been married 28 years, I have 2 boys, and I think for me it's been an issue of coming from a large family of 12 children, trying to balance the issues of our national agenda, my professional life, and my personal and family life. I think those are the 3 dominant themes in my life, and that still control my life today.
What was your training in?
Actually, I'm a teacher, but I never ever taught. Because in those days, the only way I could get a scholarship was to do a teaching degree. Because the international organizations wanted teachers in Southern Africa and so on. But I never ever taught because I just couldn't see myself coming to teach in 1977 in the apartheid system, and that was when I actually went to work with the church, because the church was the only unbanned institution at that time and did most of the development work and the anti-apartheid work. So that is actually my background. I actually had mostly a background in the non-profit sector, where I worked with NGOs. That's the Rockefeller Connection, where we were the first organization to give funding to black organizations in South Africa that repeatedly got banned, but we just continued. But our whole purpose was to try and develop a cadre of black professionals committed to public service, because that didn't exist very easily in the 70s. I mean, you could join, something like the ANC and obviously go and work as an activist or underground, but you were then working mostly outside the country unless you were underground.
How did you segue from that to corporate leadership, to your role as board chair of several companies?
What happened when I came back to South Africa in 94, there was the separation of the non-profit sector from government. All the kinds of long-distance programs, the SACITs, etc., where now their work was legitimately going back to government. That was, for instance, education, health, community development. And I was also curious as to why, as what we now call social entrepreneurs, why we couldn't succeed like a Microsoft or Google. Why couldn't we just harness all these issues and as massive organizations and do something about our socioeconomic challenges? And I was trying to find out, what is it about multinationals that can get this energy, this organization, and achieve so much? So in 94, because of my background in training black professionals, I joined the first empowerment company in South Africa, which was Tebe Investment Corporation, and I spent 5 years there. And my job there was to bring in black professionals into the corporate sector, because there weren't black professionals in the companies and the greenfield projects that they had. So that was my transition into the corporate sector, the for-profit sector. And after that, I decided that actually I wanted to concentrate on governance. Again, the whole issue of fairness, what is doing the right thing, how do you deal with ethics, etc., etc., etc.
Wonderful. Shirley Arnold. If you could move down 3 chairs. Let me introduce to you now Gail Curtis. And as she's stepping down, Gail is the Group CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi South Africa. And for those of you not familiar with the advertising world, Saatchi & Saatchi is huge. I told Gail last night I always wanted to be tall, and I ended up being a midget. Anyway, she grew Saatchi & Saatchi to the point of being considered you know, one of the major hubs of the company in not only in South Africa, but the entire region. She began by working as an account executive in 3 of the top PR companies here, Hunt Lascaris, Ogilvy and Mather, Interpublic Group, and her bio notes that she was named a board director at the age of 26. In 2002, she was the first woman to be awarded the Financial Mail Long-Term Achievement Award for her innovation of the agency business model. In 2009, this year, she was voted among the top 10 of South Africa's advertising most powerful and influential people in Ad Review. So Gail Curtis. Hi, Gail. So
we're from the communication section.
So were you born here?
Can you hear?
Yes.
I'm also from Durban, so clearly Durban's the place to So it's not Cape Town, it's not Johannesburg, Durban's the place. Nick Shirley and myself, that's never say anymore.
So were you the creative sort from the beginning? I mean, was your training in the arts? How did you end up being in advertising?
Well, it's actually quite interesting, and I think a lot of the younger generation will most probably relate to this, is that I didn't want to be like my mum, because you know, Shirley was fighting the battle for us, as you can see, so she's politicizing and all that. I'm fortunate to have been born in the era where my mum didn't work, most mums didn't, and they had to rely on husbands to take care of them. And for some reason, I didn't feel really comfortable about that. And my mum was a musician, and I thought that I was going to sing most of my life, so I was a classical training, and I was doing a Stepford. And my mum didn't think that was really quite a good profession. And I went to Potch Girls High, and couldn't speak Afrikaans and was very bad at maths. So she was manager of pilot and sent me to a school called Maria Viljoen, and it was Afrikaans. And I said, but I thought she'd made a mistake. And she said, well, how do you expect to learn the language? So that's where I became familiar with, you know, there's lots of different languages in South Africa. So I have actually a singing and very musical background, and have been on the stage and used to perform since I was about 3. So I suppose it sort of lends itself for moving into the communication sector, but I'll tell you a little bit about that later.
So how did you make your first move into advertising?
I always knew I wanted to be in marketing because I had done economics and business economics, and I had a flair for it, and I felt that, and I think this is really important. I speak to a lot of students, and they don't really know what it is that they want to do, and they don't spend enough time thinking about, you know, what their direction and what their passion is. And I started off in the financial industry for a company called Legal & General, and begged the marketing director to make me a secretarial marketing assistant. Purely because my mother didn't think I was going to make any money out of singing, and I suppose she was right. And I really did, and my mom bought me my first outfit and said, no, you're going to go and get a proper job, and I was about 20 at the time. And I started studying and working at the same time, and I found that very, very valuable. I found the combination of getting this sort of academic background and really, really being in the workplace was very valuable, and I think that defined a lot of my work personality.
You learned how to work.
Yeah.
Well, it is a skill. It's not just what you learn in the classes, it's how you take all of that and put it to task, if you will. So, so advertising had your passion?
Absolutely not. So, there you go. See, being a CEO and heading up a group and doing all that sort of stuff, you think it's fabulous. It's an interesting thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little later, is that you sort of land up there because you do a job well. But I'm a marketer by profession. I'm a marketing strategist. It's what I do. And so I work for several multinational companies like Beechnut and Royal Beechnut. And in the process of being a marketing manager and having these nice little brand managers that did all this work for me and going out into the sales force, I thought I had what I would define as a marketing personality, and that's what I was going to do, because advertising agencies were awful places. Clients fired them all the time, And I certainly didn't want to be there. It looked really, really awful. And a marketing director convinced me to join a company called Campbell Ewald at that time, and really took him about a year to get me to move from marketing into advertising, and I hated it. And in fact, I cried to my best friend. I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. I mean, imagine being a marketing manager and have to get in your car and drive all the way, because we didn't have cell phones, to a client to present a media schedule. So it was too awful, it was horrendous, and all our clients fired us within the first month of me being there. We lost about 3 clients. So my confidence was terrible. So my entry into advertising was quite horrific. So I changed it. I became a marketing strategist in the advertising industry, purely because I love marketing so much. So I started doing all my clients' marketing strategies for them, and well, hence I became quite successful.
No kidding. Now you're CEO. Anyway, Gail Curtis. Our next executive is Empo Letlape. So if you can come down here. She is the managing director of the Cecil Inzalo Foundation, which is an initiative of Cecil Limited. And basically what the foundation tries to do is to contribute to sustainable economic growth in South Africa by focusing on skills development in math, science, and technology. I actually knew her when she was head of human resources at Eskom, right? Many, many years ago. Before that, she was head of human resources for IBM South Africa, and she was there for 19 years. So this move from profit making to nonprofit, right, is something that you very much enjoy. She's a member of the board of the Institute for People Management, the South Africa Coalition on HIV/AIDS, and the Global Health Initiative of the World Economic Forum is something that she was involved in. So, Empo, tell us a little bit about your background as well. You've heard the others. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? What is your training?
No.
How many kids in your family?
Fortunately not Devon. Devon is as big as a handkerchief, and I get lost every time trying to drive in Devon, so it's got something against me. But I was born in Springs, and Springs is about 60 kilometers southeast of here, more east than south. And I grew up there until I was 14, when my parents sent me to boarding school. Now, you have to understand, South Africa is a very tribal country, and in Springs there were no schools that taught Sepedi, and I am a Mopedi, so my parents thought I should spend at least the last 2 years of my school life learning Sepedi, which I did. I went to Polokwane, which was Petersburg then, and I did matric there, then went on to the University of the North in 1976, and as we know, June 1976, South Africa went up in flames, and was in and out of university until my parents decided, let's find some stability for her, and they sent me to Fort Hare University, where I was fortunate. I got an IBM scholarship. I then went to Fort Hare University, where I studied computer science. But computer science does not have a logical partner. It's not maths, it's not chemistry, it's not anything. So I had to find another major, because then you had to have 2 majors to get your degree. And I looked around and I thought psychology was interesting, so I majored in computer science and psychology. And I mean, people think I'm odd. I know I am. But that's what I did. I then joined IBM in 1981 as a student trainee, and I was a systems engineer. So people don't know this, but I was not born into human resources. Human resources was my hobby. Computer science was my profession.
But you were an engineer by profession?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So I started life as a systems engineer and went up the ranks in IBM, from trainee systems engineer to advisory systems engineer, which is one down from the ultimate systems engineering rank, if I could call it, which was consultant. But IBM had this belief that before you become a consultant systems engineer, you have to go and do a line job instead of a field job, which is what you were as a systems engineer. And you had 2 choices. You either went and worked in field services, which is supporting the line people, or you went to education. I went to education, and surprise, surprise, I loved teaching. And I was teaching other systems engineers and systems programmers. And I stayed there, left after 3 years instead of the 1 year, went back to the field, but then very critical of what was happening in the education department at the time. They said, "Mpo, go back and fix it." And then I was appointed into my first management position, which I really enjoyed. And then, end of 1994, IBM, which had left South Africa earlier because of sanctions, came back to South Africa and brought back the local operation. And they needed to integrate IBM systems into the local operation. And human resources was one of the areas that they needed to work on. So they looked around for somebody with line experience, but who also understood and appreciated the human aspects. And I was fingered. And I have to be honest, I nearly left the organization because we thought only the really, really useless people get sent to go and work in human resources. So I went to my boss, then the chief executive, and I said, "Should I be giving you my resignation? What have I done wrong?" And he said, "No, Mpo, you don't understand. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. It's just integration, and we think we think that you're the best person to do that." I then went into systems into human resources, and I had an opportunity to then move from my trained profession into my hobby, which I fortunately had some training in, and that's how I ended up in human resources, and I have not regretted that decision at all. IBM then sent me to Paris in 1998, and then I came back and they appointed me as a director of the IBM Corporation, which was a great deal for me because I was the first black person outside of the United States to be named a director of the IBM Corporation. I then did that for 2 years, but South Africa had become very exciting and I wanted to work in a South African organization. And again, I was really lucky. Eskom offered me the job, had hunted me and offered me the job of head of human resources at Eskom. I went in there and I worked there for 8 years. And that again was where I spent the best years of my life, really. Because when I arrived at Eskom, there were no women in senior management, there were no women general managers, and women, what are you talking about? What are those things? Today, I'm proud to say that, a quarter of the general managers in Eskom are women. And I'm proud to say that it was an initiative, it was something that I consciously went out to do. And yesterday, I got a call in the afternoon, and then I got an email, and I was told that, Solumulefe, who heads finance in one of the divisions, the general manager, was named as the executive of the year in Eskom, which is a huge deal. And one of the things that I promised myself was that the general managers would be appointed in line jobs, none in human resources and none in communications, and that I achieved. And I worked a lot with the women in Eskom, and I mentored a lot of them personally, and it was one of the greatest things that I did. But then when I was approaching 50, I decided, I asked myself, is this it? And I decided, no, there's more. You have another 10 years of working life left in you. What are you going to do with it? And I decided this is the time to go and work on my passion now, which was skills and youth. And I realized that if I remained in Eskom, I would never find the opportunity to do that. So I resigned. And I must tell you, I went and I saw a psychiatrist because everybody thought I was mad to go from a global, international, private sector organization to a state-owned enterprise and to now want to go and do something in the NGO sector. And after a few sessions with my psychiatrist, we decided there was nothing wrong with me. I'm just following my passion. And I left work. I was unemployed for 4 months. And then I found the greatest opportunity. Sasol, one of the largest industrial companies in South Africa, in fact, the largest industrial taxpayer in South Africa, asked me to start up the Sasol Inzalo Education Foundation for them. I've been doing it for 4 months now. And
you love it.
Having fun. I am having a ball. Just watch this space.
Great, great. Thank you very much. I'm full of laughter. Yeah. No, stay there, just move down. We're still missing one of our panelists who's probably caught in. Oh, Vuyo? Is Vuyo here? Oh, Vuyo's here. Okay, sorry. Move down. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm so glad she's here. Vuyo's our baby. Vuyo is the chair of the South African Post Office Board of Directors, and that includes the Post Bank. She served 2 terms on the Financial Markets Advisory Board. She's also a member of the Financial Services Board Licensing Committee. She spent several years at the Development Bank of South Africa, and she was a program manager at DTI's Investment Facilitation Program, focusing on agri-tourism investments. Last year, she received the Black Management Forum Presidential Award for Transformational Leadership. So welcome, Vuyo. I'm glad you finally made it through the traffic. Yes, I know that's not an easy feat in the morning. So you've heard the others. We'd like for you to say a few words about your background, where you're from, where you went to school, how come you're so young and still... Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much. I must say, indeed, and it's nice to be here. Greetings to everybody. It was absolutely lovely to listen to the stories. And it's amazing that you listen and all of a sudden it takes you somewhere else. I mean, what I thought I would say, and after they've said what they've said, they've taken me back to the beginning. And it's quite amazing how you realize, you think sometimes your story is the only peculiar one, until you listen to other people's stories in terms of how it happened, and in the end you get there. Mine was no different in terms of the beginning. I mean,
Are you from Durban?
Not from Durban, not from Springs. I was born in Grahamstown.
Okay.
I grew up in Cape Town. I studied in Transkei. I married in Transkei. So basically, and I live in Pretoria, or Tshwane at the moment. So I've been into different parts. And actually what is interesting, I'm the only girl after 3 boys. My first 2 brothers are late, so I'm left with 1. So it's just the 2 of us. And it's quite amazing having been the last born and the only girl, that somehow I ended up in a family where I became the strong one. I don't know how that happened, and it was purely from my brothers giving me the space. And I think it was an escape thing for them, you know, not wanting to take responsibility, always pushing me forward. And I remember the last time when this was so complicated, I was still in high school, beginning of high school, when my parents divorced. And we're all in boarding school. And my brothers came back home, called a meeting, and got me back as well. And I mean, between me and the firstborn, it's about 10-year difference. And we're all sitting down, and they were like, you know, these guys are divorcing, and we think we need to contest the divorce of the children. Just thinking, you know, I mean, what does that mean? And, you know, it was interesting, my late brother, who's the firstborn, got each and every one of us to say something about how we feel about this. And they were all, I mean, they even spoke to a lawyer who gave them, you know, a position on how this could be handled. And I stood there and said, guys, I mean, you know, if something is not working, it's not working. And we know this is not working. So why are we sitting here having this discussion? And everybody was like, really? So you believe that, you know, we were more worried about you, and if you feel like that, we don't need the lawyer there. So, I mean, it's always been for me those experiences that got me to realize that actually it's amazing how decisions are made and how the things that people consider, and it's usually the best times when you just say what you feel, that you get to where you want to be. But I started as a maths and science student from St. John's College, which was mainly, you know, a boarding school in Umtata. Went to university as a maths and science.
As a what?
Maths and science student, you know, doing BSc, Bachelor of Science. It is there that I realized how crazy I am. Because I then recognized that within physics, you know, chemistry and physics, physical science and chemistry are very different. And I am better with physics than I am with chemistry. It was amazing at that point because I failed chemistry dismally. I got, I think, 35% or something like that. Whereas with physics, I did very well. And it was at that point when I failed that chemistry that I realized that I have a big problem with memory, with short-term memory. I'm a person of ideas, strategic ideas and everything. And my math side is going into that side. And I tried to convince my parents, you know, the difference between the two. And my mother, being a teacher, was not convinced and thought I was just being lazy. So I decided to I continued, you know, with the first year of BSc straight, you know, when I was getting into my second year, registered again, you know. And another interesting thing is that I love nature and discovered at universities, even though I did plants and biological sciences, that actually I love the idea of nature from a spiritual perspective and loving nature, not necessarily the species. Again, there was a memory problem with the species because you have to remember each and every one. So the shift then quickly moved me to an environment where I ended up finishing the BSc in science, but in clinical sciences. Beginning to look at alternatives by the time I was getting to third and fourth year to make sure that I have a career that's not going to put me in the lab, because I also worked in the lab during holidays, school holidays, and realized that's not me. You sit, you have to titrate, it's in front of you. If the measurement is not 2 mils, it's not it. It has to be. And I thought, there's no creative space here. I am not the kind of person who has to follow routine the way it is. So that assisted in the beginning of understanding myself, but I didn't tell my parents that I changed the degree. So every time it was report time, the post was coming, I had to quickly check them because they didn't know that their daughter is no longer doing what they had to do, until one day my mother found out and called me and said, now we know you are not doing what you did. But I'm glad, because that took me to a working environment. I started working in a work assessment unit in Cape Town, where when people have had accidents, placement back to work, you had to assess their level of readiness and capability.
That was your first job?
That was my first job. And
what did you end up getting a degree in?
I ended up getting a degree, a BSc in occupational therapy, a Bachelor of Science straight, with later on with occupational therapy honors.
I don't know how that connects with physics.
And then that started me there. So in this work assessment center, that's where I realized that, you know, it was interesting that one of my patients in that center was a man called Oscar Mbeta. And it was interesting, at that time I was already in student politics, but he took me to another level in terms of the understanding beyond just work of the politics from an economic perspective, so the activism that started from there took me another direction.
So how did you move from all of that to business?
Okay, what happens at the work assessment, then I realized that the issue for me is not the health side. I then focused on creating opportunities, job opportunities for those people who can't go back to work. And that took me to business. And then from there, I started a business linkage center for people who can't go back to work, creating opportunities with business, with Jordan shoes, with, you know, somewhere in sewing, with home choice, for instance, whatever it was called at that time, putting groups together. And then I started business, you know, back to school, studying business with the Graduate School of Business, with Tamelins and everybody. And then from there, it got the interest into economics, hence then studied further in economics with my master's in development and economics. So, but more at that, and worked with the Small Business Development Corporation, because my business linkage business now was really, you know, growing and growing. And I became a full-time mentor of the Small Business Development Corporation, and set up a consulting business where basically it was more, I mean, the demand was coming from private sector as well as from Small Business Development Corporation and others in terms of assisting with business linkages. And that sort of took me, actually, that is where at the age of 23, I was the finalist with Ashoka for social entrepreneurship because of the number of businesses that I generated during that time, and I didn't even know what social entrepreneurship was about. I was just doing my work. But the policy side, it grew further and further, ending up in the Bill of Rights, participating, from a socio-economic rights perspective, working with the United Nations, UNICEF, Scholastica at the time. Young people were being groomed, and ended up, within the CODESA teams. Within the Constitution, I can see lines where I was part of the technical team.
So how did you end up being on the board of the post office?
Well, I got involved in policy development within the Department of Trade and Industry, for instance, within the Kulas, and participated in development finance is the area that I specialized in later on. And within the work around the development finance started, on the post-bank side, actually, mainly where I was working on advisory services on the post-bank side, and with the other work that you see that I was doing. And then from there, with the other corporate director work that I've been engaged in, people seeing with most of the board position that I've held, I've had to extend, from both the private sector and public sector perspective, the terms. So basically, I do believe that there was something right that I was doing that got the attention of people across the board.
Well, you certainly did. So, William Malapi. So here you have, I don't even know what to call it, occupational therapist, engineer, artist, economist, educator. So you see how from varied backgrounds you can end up having a business leadership role. That there's no straight path to it, but whatever path it is, somehow leadership emerges. So all of you have achieved in very great ways. I'm fascinated by each of your stories. Now, success is not, in my book, a straight trajectory, unlike what most people think.
No,
That's good. So what about the rest of you? Was there ever a crisis point, a bad point in your life that made you switch gears?
There have been many. And it's what you do.
No, but that's important for people to know.
There have been many, and it's what you do with them that determines what happens. I resigned from IBM in a huff in 1997 because they made me mad. They made me really, really mad. And I did not make a rational decision. I made an emotional decision. And I went and worked for an organization I knew I should not go and work for. And I walked in and I realized, oh, you've made a mistake. Now, pride says, stick it out. First month, stick it out. Second month, stick it out. Third month. And when I started profaning in board meetings, I realized that I'm going to go downhill very, very fast because it is no longer about me. I'm allowing myself to be a victim of environment that I created for myself by resigning from IBM. So I then resigned, and I said, I made a mistake. I resigned, and I was ready for unemployment. I resigned in September after I'd joined in April, and I was cool. I was going to not work for 3 months, and I was going to look for a job in January. But fortunately, the minute IBM heard that I had left, they said, come back. We need you, we want you, we appreciate you. We know we made a mistake, and let's talk it through and find an amicable decision from this. And that's how I ended up going to work in Paris in 1998, and I came back and I was...
What a switch. I mean, quit and go to Paris. So what's the lesson in that?
The lesson I learned is trust your gut. Gut feel is there for a reason. And I knew in my gut that I should not go work for this organization, but I did. I did not trust myself.
Also the business about maybe chill out for a while before you make an irrational decision, an emotional one. Okay. Any of either you? I mean, you don't have to tell us if there was a crisis point, but
I think from, I was 22 when I got married. And I had finished, school honors. And I married a guy, my husband, for over 20 years now, who is a doctor and had businesses, was driving a Porsche, and I insisted on marrying out of community. And I remember my sister-in-law, who's a very flamboyant person, looking at me, the sister to the husband, who said, "Are you crazy? Why would you marry out of community? Today you have nothing. You marry this guy, tomorrow you have half everything he has." And that was born out of this drive from the beginning for me of independence.
So that's a crisis?
No, let me get to the crisis point. The crisis then drives to a point where I had my own businesses. I didn't include that part. And I was running a wholesale agent where I was supplying, fashion shops and got into import-export as part of that. But there was a time when the industry, with the coming in of the Chinese cheaper stuff, my business started going down badly. And I got to a point where I was not telling my husband how bad things are. And I was so broke, almost to a point of being liquidated, where every time I've got properties in my own name, where I would be worried that they would come and basically take everything. Every time the doorbell rings, I was scared that somebody is coming, until I learned a lesson that the word is not independence away from somebody, the interdependence from a relationship perspective, the confidence in self and needing others and forming that bond of interdependence took me to a different level, not just in my personal relationship, but also broadly in terms of life.
I think that's an important lesson, because you were a lone ranger and very confident about your ability to handle everything. The only girl with a bunch of boys.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And no boys telling me what.
Shirley?
I think I would say that I actually had a number of crisis points. I've been retrenched, I've been unemployed for periods. And I think coming from a different, when we grew up, it was all about getting rid of apartheid. It wasn't about your job. You were given jobs. It still happens. When you watch government, that's how it happens. That's how I got the job as chairman of Telkom, and I'm now the outgoing chairman. And it's a different idea. It's not just about your corporate, professional contribution and career. It's about service to your country. And I think that there isn't really a separation, because if I look at what I've achieved in the corporate sector with this switch, it's about doing something well, regardless of what that job is.
And that has allowed you to survive the crisis points in your life by knowing what is this overarching idea that guides all your decisions.
Yeah, and I think that you do get recognized for doing a good job. I don't see myself as a leader. I see myself as a manager. And I think every single person is a manager, even a child-headed household where the parents have died.
Wait. That leads me to my next question, because my next question has to do with how do each of you define leadership? Because each of you are considered leaders in your specific areas, but you just said you don't see yourself as a leader?
No, I think to me a leader is someone like Nelson Mandela.
So what are those qualities that you feel you don't possess?
No, because I think that we mix up being a celebrity with being a leader, and being a worker with being a celebrity and a leader. I think if you're a CEO, it's a job, it's a title, just like a nurse, a teacher, a principal.
But not many people get to be CEOs, male or female.
They don't get there, but I think what we've seen here today is that most of us got these jobs not because we set out to get them, but because we were recognized for the work that we did. I mean, nearly every single one of us never started off with saying, I am going to be the CEO. I think it's good to have those ambitions and say, I want to be a CEO. And I think that in this part of our country's history, that is a possibility. That was not a possibility prior to 95. before. You couldn't say, I want to be a leader, a CEO, or a doctor, or this or that. So it's two historical, different periods. But I think the principle is still the same, is that the people who will eventually become a CEO or the head of a chairman or whatever is going to be somebody that's got a good track record.
Okay, Gail?
Because people give you those jobs because they've got to have the confidence that you can do it, and you've got to have a track record somewhere that says, yes, I've gone into difficult situations, I've overcome my crises, my failures, I've recognized them, I've looked at my limitations, but I have still achieved certain things.
Gail?
It's a question I think that you are asked a lot, and there's so many different answers for it. But if one has to answer what is leadership, and we can spend the entire day just talking about it, it's about having a purpose and having a dream. And more importantly, getting people to come along with you.
Very important.
Very, very, very important. You sleep at night because you have a good team around you. You're as good as the people you work with. And you need to have an absolute ability to take those people along that path with you. It's all about one team, one dream. And I think that the old-fashioned way of a traditional hierarchical mindset is so passé. I think that we're going to see a huge difference in the next couple of years about how leadership really, really is defined. And I think that you, the youth, will redefine that for us. But I can honestly and truly say that to lead, you also have to have confidence. But more importantly, just don't believe your own PR. Really, that is just a load of rubbish. When you have a title, there is a big perception around that title. And I often say to people, and I agree with Shirley, you work hard. You've got to get up every morning of your life and enjoy what you do. Otherwise, go and find a company or a job that you do. Do not waste your time. And don't go for the money. Go for what your passion is, because you spend most of your life working. So when you start off, make sure you do something that you want to get up in the morning and actually go out and do, because then you will actually succeed. And I think that is absolutely, totally critical. And your ability to emotionally connect, to really, really give a shit about what people think, is really, really critical. We had a crisis in our organization where we had a top guy leave, and I called everyone around and I sat them all down on the floor. So get off the chairs and sit around on the floor. We sat down, and they were all, people like to complain and carry on. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. And, because you are a CEO of a company, I always say to people, why don't you come in and say hello to me? You'd be amazed how lonely it is. People don't want to come and talk to you. So, because you have a title. And I see it a lot, where people are managing directors, and therefore their staff go, he's the managing director. And I spend most of my life, and that's why I love the HR and human resource background that some of my colleagues have, is that it is ridiculous. Because a person's a managing director, you can't talk to him, you can't ask him how he is, no one asks each other how they are. I think you should level it out, do what you do well. There's got to be a leader, a ship's got to have someone that basically oversees that other people are actually doing their job and that they're doing it well. But more importantly, that you support those people and enable them to actually do their job well.
Great.
And that's what will make you a successful leader.
Wonderful definition. And in the human resources field, part of your job is recognizing who those potential leaders are. So what are the qualities that you look for when you were an HR professional? What showed you immediately that this person has the skills and the wherewithal to lead parts of a company?
You would need to listen to the people and to hear what they are saying. And what I looked for was their response to different situations. When somebody walked into my office and said, I'm a democratic leader, I would say, what is that? Do you mean that if the situation requires for you to take charge, You will still consult when there is a fire, when you need to take charge. So what I look for is leaders and people that respond to the situation that they are in. And I always say, be in the time, be in the place, be in the space that you are in at that particular point in time. Don't box yourself into one area, because you then will not be able to respond to the different challenges and to the different situations that we have. You also cannot manage each person the same way. I mean, I have 4 children who went to different schools because they were different children. And I felt that it's unfair for me to put them in one school for my convenience. I need to put them where they will adapt and they will thrive. And I'd much rather drive to 4 different places than make it comfortable and convenient. So for me, leading in the situation is critical. And sometimes taking a back seat and allowing others to lead is very important. And for me, it's very difficult because I'm a control freak. But I'm very aware and very conscious of that. And I'm also a very realistic perfectionist. I look at poor Mary over there. She's worked for me before, and she's but it's some things that I'm very conscious of and very aware of. So I also look for a person that knows themselves and know when they can be empowering, and also know when they can be devastating, and respond to that. And that's what I've spent a lot of the time when I coach young women and I mentor young women. I spend a lot of time with them on those aspects of their. I also believe that one has to play. It's very important to not be serious all the time, and to not take yourself and not take life very seriously, to be able to adapt.
That's a good
and
lesson.
do different things.
Absolutely. Flexibility. Vuyo?
You know, I have had the burden from very early of being given serious, you know, responsible positions with everybody around me who's a leader. So I've had a burden of leading leaders who are more qualified and probably, I mean, from an age perspective,
So how do you
have
define?
more maturity and wisdom.
Right.
And I define leadership personally as a person who provides strategic direction and a person who inspires. You need to be able to, for me, a leader must inspire, a leader must be decisive, a leader must always be ahead in terms of understanding each, and I must understand what you need, what I need, what you need, even before sometimes you're aware of what you need. So that at a time when we have a crisis, you're not going to find the person who's going to go under the chair because they're scared. It must be that at that time of the crisis, you would have anticipated, even obviously not to the T, but some level to be able at that point. You know, I give an example again of Mandela. When he comes out of prison, you know, that day we were there, and a few days after that, he is in a meeting of the youth, and there are all the universities, Africana and whatever, and he sits there and we sing Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. And after that, he, you know, with his hand still up here, and he says, now you are going to sing Distem. Distem, well, you know, at the time was the Africana national anthem, which to us was a swear word. And, you know, we looked at each other and he said, we are going to sing Distem. And that was his beginning of the reconciliation journey. But the critical issue about his leadership style was taking you with him. You knew, even sometimes when you don't even appreciate what he's doing at the time, but there is that appreciation of the journey that he's taking you through, and trust in the fact that where he's taking you to is somewhere you are to be. So I however, Shelly, have, I mean, a different view about leadership and management. I mean, I don't see myself very often as a manager. And I don't even though, because I believe that the role of the manager goes deeper in terms of ensuring that things are carried through.
Okay. Is it possible to be both a manager and leader at the same time? I mean, there are people who can lead and also make details happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think you can be both. When I say a manager, I think I'm trying to say that all people are leaders in wherever they are. You have to take leadership in any bureaucracy, in any department, wherever you are. And to me, the management of the strategy and what goes with it, that I think it's using manager at a different level. Because if I'm a chairman of a board, I am responsible for the management. But I've also got to manage my board members. I've got to manage this. The very process you're talking about is continually trying to taking the people with you. To me, that's a kind of management function. It's not the pushing the papers around on the desk and filling in your little objectives and what. It's the big scheme. And how do I keep my focus on my priorities? Because there's always crises coming. How do I not get sidelined? So I'm constantly stepping back and saying, how am I going to manage this new situation? Wherever I find myself, whether it's in a board meeting, whether it's dealing with my stakeholders, or dealing with a crisis in my secretariat, because some secretary or somebody's had a problem, but it has a big impact on me because my board packs might not go out.
Right.
Or something like
Yeah,
that.
I just wanted to say last thing that leadership is not always about being in front.
Exactly. So that's why I say you've got to sometimes step back and say, how is this going to unfold? And who am I going to make sure makes this happen? Who do I give the responsibility to?
Okay. There are very few of you yet among women. There are still very few, and I gave some statistics earlier, among women to hold leadership roles, however you define leader. So what do you think, in each of your personal opinions, still hold women back?
Confidence.
Okay, one word.
Themselves.
Both the men and the women, both us and them. Us in our reluctance to confront them, and them in their refusal to invite us in. And we need to find a balance with those. And we need to learn to confront without alienating, because we need them. They've got the experience. Not enough of us have got the experience. I've found that I've always had mentors in my life, and other than my mother, all my mentors have been men.
Okay. It was supposed to be one word.
I think going for what you want.
Okay. Let me just ask this. You mentioned mentors. Did each of you have a mentor? Did you feel that that was necessary in order to succeed? Anybody?
I think mentors is overrated. I think mentorship is overrated. And I was supposed to explain what I said just now about themselves, is that there's too much focus on being a woman, and therefore I can't be successful and I can't get to what I want. And I see this. And if you go out there, you're good at what you do. It doesn't matter about your gender. I'm proof of that. In an industry that's very male-dominated. So don't hold yourself back. And I don't read self-help books, because that takes time to read the self-help book to remind myself what the self-help person has given me for the 7 steps to financial freedom. I'd like to write my own book about my own 7 steps to financial freedom. So I'd rather use that time doing what I have to do. So don't hold yourselves back.
I agree with Gail, but I disagree with her on the issue of mentorship being overrated. I don't, because I just cannot read them. I've tried, I've bought them, I've opened them, and I've looked at them, and I've said, and I've moved on. So I don't. But you need mentors. You need mentors. You need people that are going to coach you, that are going to guide you, but also you need people that are going to help you break down some walls and punch out some ceilings. And very often you cannot do it on your own.
Okay. Shirley?
Yeah, I must mentorship issue, because sometimes I think it's also disempowering. But I do think that maybe I've had mentors, but I've just called them different things. Because I do have women and men, but mostly women, who, when I'm either really down or I've got a really difficult situation, I can talk to, and I know I have their confidence. And it's having access to them, but I don't think they see themselves as a mentor to me. And some of them are my age, some of them are younger, and in fact, I've been doing this mentorship thing. And I've actually found that I'm often more inspired by the people I'm supposed to be mentoring.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's a good case for it. But I think you shouldn't say to yourself, oh, I've got to go and find a chairman who's a mentor or a CEO who's a mentor, because it's also about your personal chemistry. You definitely need a support network. You definitely need people who can affirm you. You definitely need someone who suddenly, when you start talking to them, you actually find your own solution. But they are allowing you to give voice to what you are experiencing. So I think just be careful, don't think because, and also I don't believe in one mentor. I think you need mentors for different things.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, you know, I'm fighting with my husband, or my child's got a problem, or my, issue at work. It's very often different things and different people that you go to. So I would say definitely have a support network.
Okay, last question to everybody. Work-life balance. This is an issue that's been brought up by many women in every country. Doesn't matter what your position is, whether you're a waitress or an executive, work-life balance does impact on your ability to move in your career. How did you handle it?
Well,
Quickly, each one of
very
you.
quickly, I must say that the work-life balance, trying to get my husband to have work-life balance is my biggest challenge, because I think I've got it.
You got it, but he doesn't.
He's a workaholic, so that's an issue. The second thing I did is that when I was obsessive about having children, is that I decided I could either sort of ignore my kids because we were going through lots of changes, different countries, different schools, etc., or I could make a lot of money and then pay for it in therapy, because a lot of my friends were in therapy and so on. So I actually took a decision to make a financial sacrifice, that I would not work full-time, and that I would be there, and that's where governance is there. But I think it's a constant challenge, and it constantly changes. And I think it also depends on the kind of kinds of children that you have. I mean, the example that Paul gave is something that I definitely would relate to. So I think you have to have it, though. I think a lot of women spend too much time at work.
Okay, so you would define it as having made a personal sacrifice and taking time off from work and having, to be frank, a husband who could support financially the whole family. Gail?
Don't smoke, don't drink, don't take drugs. Really, Monday to Friday, focus. Don't eat chocolate at work, it's a mood enhancer. Cut out the sweet stuff. Put yourself on some form of regime that says, from Monday to Friday, I'm going to work in the best interest of the organization, and more importantly, take care of yourself, and go one step further. Do something that you're really, really passionate about. Whether you go and study dancing or go and play golf, but do something you really, really enjoy, so that you can bring that passion and inspiration. And we often find that we inspire people in our organization by getting them to do projects outside of what their daily skill is. So whether it's on the Christmas party committee, or you'll be amazed whether it's social responsibility, sustainability development projects, and you'll see how people shine in projects outside of what they do on a daily basis. But really, really, in one word, really take care of yourselves. You're in it for the long haul, and as women, we really, really need to make sure that we do that.
Yeah. Tempo?
Compromise and learn to manage the urgent and the important continuously. I mean, you need to refine and fine-tune that. Also convince your boss that your family is most important to you, and your family that your work is most important for you, because then they help you balance it. But seriously, it's communicating who you are, where you are, almost on a daily basis, because sometimes work is going to be more important than family, sometimes family is going to be more important than work, and sometimes you're going to be more important than both. So it's a matter of being honest and transparent about where you are at any point in time. I mean, last night I had to make a call. Do I go to dinner with these nice, influential ladies, or do I go watch my son sing for 2 minutes on stage? I went and watched my son sing for 2 minutes on stage, and I couldn't trade that in for anything. So it's a matter of balancing and compromising and just weighing up and all
But
that.
she made sure that she communicated that to me, which is very important. That's called respect for others, communicating. Vuya?
Thanks. I think feeling the balance starts with feeling the inner self. I think, most of what we experience in terms of the imbalance comes from what we believe we need to do for others, most of the time. And I think by continuously feeding the inner self, that happiness is something that even if you are stressed and doing something, that really pushes you off balance, you end up going back home and feeling good about that time that you invested in this crazy situation. So I think the continuous investment in inner self is the best thing that you can continue to do yourself. It's not always easy, but it also, at times has to deal with selfishness for your own good and for the others. Sometimes I say to my children, I'm sorry, I have to be selfish and do this for myself to be a better mother for you. And I think that is something that we have to confront and be able to say and do sometimes.
Wonderfully said. Please give a hand to these incredible women. I'm sorry that time flew by so fast, and we don't have time for you to pose questions to these wonderful women. But I wanted to end this morning, and to end on time, because I know time is precious for most of you, for all of you, by speaking with you about a legacy that I think each one of you can help bring about. 3 years ago, the Global Summit of Women made a commitment to end cervical cancer, which is a cancer that only afflicts women. And you probably don't know this, but 500,000 women are diagnosed with this cancer yearly, and 250,000 die from it. In South Africa, 1 out of every 41 women will be diagnosed with this cancer going forward. And it is a cancer that can strike women in their most productive years. So the question that was asked of me, because the Global Summit of Women is primarily a business summit, why would we concern ourselves with this health issue? And for us, the answer is very simple, because good health is critical, it's fundamental to our ability to participate in any aspect of private lives. We cannot excel in anything that we want to do if we are not healthy. So the advice that Gail gave to you earlier is actually very critical. The summit is about solutions. And, we spend most of our time talking about best practices in addressing issues that women face in the workplace. Well, this cancer has a solution. Because of technology, there's now testing that is incredibly accurate and vaccines that can help prevent it from actually occurring. So what we would like to do is to leave a legacy of a cervical cancer-free generation by asking each and every one of you to inform others. There's a very low knowledge about this cancer among a lot of women, some very, very smart women. And if each one of you could just pledge to inform others, get your own self be tested. I went to my own doctor and I asked for the HPV test, and she said, why would you want it? You've been married to the same guy for 30 years. And I said, because I want it, and because a friend of mine who's on the board of a museum, who was married to the same person for 30 years, just got it. So it is a disease that does not discriminate. It can hit any kind of woman. So if we could just please help ourselves, inform ourselves, get ourselves tested, that would be great. She will be passing out cards that ask you to make a pledge, to do exactly that, to inform yourself, inform others, get yourself tested, talk to the women around you, the girls, and for the mothers to think about the vaccine that is now available to help eradicate this cancer. And together, we could leave a lasting legacy for our daughters, our nieces, and young women in our communities. Cancer is the 21st century reality given the chemical-ridden world in which we live. So this is something we can all do. And on your way out, for each place, I'm going to give you a pin. It's called the Pearl of Wisdom. It is the wisdom that we want to impart to others. So thank you so much to the Vinci Institute, Professor Anderson, its leader, and all of you for joining us this morning. For those of you who want to stay around and ask questions from the women who are here today, please do so. I know you have to go back to work or to school, and so I thank you for giving us this time and for letting us share with you the little nuggets of wisdom from these incredible women. Thank you very much.